Hello, this is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service, with reports and analysis from across the world. The latest news 7 days a week. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
This is the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service. Hello, I'm Emilio Sanpedro, and in the early hours of Monday, the 23rd of September, these are our main stories. The United Nations says the last 5 years are likely to be the hottest on record. One of the most prominent Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives says the contents of a controversial call between Donald Trump and Ukraine's president could be grounds for impeachment. Also in this podcast, tens of thousands of Indian Americans attend a joint rally of Prime Minister Modi and President Trump in Houston. And Iranian women will be allowed to attend an international football match in Iran for the first time since the revolution 4 decades ago. We hear from a prominent campaigner.
It is going to be solved because we demand it, and now we know our power.
That's all coming up, but we begin with the warning from leading scientists that climate change is accelerating and that the past 5 years are likely to be the hottest on record. The World Meteorological Organization has drawn together the latest scientific reports ahead of Monday's UN talks on climate change. It says the levels of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are rising at their fastest rate because emissions are still growing. Lina Srivastava is the co-chair of the Climate Science Advisory Group, which compiled the UN's United in Science report.
We are at risk of crossing several critical tipping points in the planetary systems. And I think there's also in the science community a greater recognition of the fact that climate impacts are hitting harder and sooner than what climate assessments had estimated almost a decade ago.
For more on the report, here's Richard Galpin.
The report by the World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, paints a particularly bleak picture. With levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere reaching new highs, it says the world is currently heading towards around 3 degrees of warming above pre-industrial times, well above the current goal. Scientists believe that level of warming could prove to be a tipping point, leading, for example, to the thawing of large amounts of permafrost, which would release methane from the ground, another greenhouse gas. A spokesman for the WMO told the BBC this snowballing effect could get to the point where the challenge to adapt to climate change is beyond reach. The report also highlights how sea levels are now rising faster due to glaciers and ice sheets melting more quickly. The WMO says countries must do much more to curb rising temperatures.
Richard Galpin. Well, one example of the increasing impact of climate change, according to experts in Switzerland, is the melting of the Pizzol Glacier in the northeastern Alps. It has shrunken to a tiny fraction of its original size, and to mark its demise, dozens of people have held what they're calling a funeral ceremony. Let's get more on the glacier from our Geneva correspondent, Imogen Folks.
Well, what we've got is dozens of people going up to the remains of the Pizzol Glacier. You've got local people, you've got climbers, hikers, environmentalists, also glacier specialists who've been charting the demise of this glacier for some years now. And the problem is, it's not a glacier anymore because it's been reduced to a few frozen lumps. The rock and the earth and the mud are poking up in between. So it's just broken up. And what's left of the ice, and there isn't much left, will be gone very, very soon. So the idea was to have a proper memorial ceremony, a funeral, if you like. But I've talked to numerous glaciologists in Switzerland involved in this work, and they are actually united in their conviction that this is to do with global warming and will have consequences for the glaciers. The glaciers supply fresh water to Europe. They hold the permafrost up in the Alps together. That means cable car stanchions. That means stopping rock and mudslides down into the Alpine valleys.
Imogen Folks in Geneva. Well, across the world in Kenya, small-scale farmers have started receiving payments from an insurance scheme that seeks to protect them from the effects of climate change. 98% of Kenya's agriculture is rain-fed, but weakened harvests from poor rainfall over the years have threatened the livelihoods of many rural farmers. And as the BBC's Ferdinand Omondi reports from eastern Kenya, the crop insurance is beginning to restore faith in agriculture.
It's early morning in Makueni, eastern Kenya. In the middle of a compound, seated on a wooden stool, calabash in hand, Penina is winnowing maize. The dry cobs can barely fill a sack. This is part of Penina's harvest from the last planting season. It isn't as much as she expected, but Penina tells me a poor harvest in Makueni, in this semi-arid part of Kenya, is now a common occurrence after years of persistently unpredictable rains.
In the past, we used to receive a lot of rainfall. We normally got 2 solid rainy seasons, but of late, the rains have greatly reduced. So has our harvest.
Penina then leads me to a plot behind her house. 15 years ago, she says, the plot would have reaped 50 bags of maize, but this season, she says she got only 2. That loss would have crippled her. Only this time, she says she was shielded by a crop insurance scheme which paid for her loss.
The first time they paid me, I went and bought 5 chicken. They laid eggs, the eggs hatched, and now I have about 150 chicken, all from the payment I got from the insurance cover. I can say I am now doing well. My next project is now to buy milk cows when I get paid.
Crop insurance was introduced for the first time in eastern Kenya 2 seasons ago by World Cover, an insurance startup that also has a foothold in Ghana and Uganda. The scheme, which currently covers around 35,000 people, seeks to protect smallholder farmers from the continuing effects of climate change. The policy starts from as low as $10 a season and can go up to $40. Teresa Shorstein, the company's head of insurance, explains how they determine compensation.
The beauty about this climate insurance is that it's actually, it depends on rainfall measurements. As soon as we see that there was less than average rainfall, they will get a payout in accordance with their policy.
At another farm not too far away, the sharp blades of a plow tear up the hard red soil. 2 large bulls pull it forward, steered on by David, the farm owner. It's supposed to be rainy season, but yet again the rains have delayed. However, David is still preparing his land. Last season, he says, he insured his crops for $40 and got paid $70 after the metric measurement, which was on top of whatever he had harvested. It is this assurance which he says keeps him farming while some of his neighbors have given up.
It has given me some comfort and peace. When there is no rain, at least I'll get back my capital.
The world over, many farmers who depend on rain-fed agriculture are feeling the effects of climate change with reducing rainfall and produce. But as countries seek lasting solutions, stopgap measures like crop insurance means small-scale farmers can still live with dignity amid constant challenges that threaten their livelihoods.
That report by Ferdinand Omondi in Kenya. Now to Houston, Texas.
His Excellency, the Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi.
They're both men who enjoy the adulation of large crowds, both men whose professed nationalist aim is to put their countries first. So President Trump and Narendra Modi were in their element on Sunday when they addressed a rally of tens of thousands of Indian Americans in Houston, Texas. The organizers of the event for the Indian Prime Minister, called Howdy Modi, described it as the largest gathering for a foreign leader other than the Pope. Mr. Modi's visit comes ahead of a UN General Assembly meeting at which he's expected to face criticism of his decision to revoke the special status of Kashmir, flooding troops into the region and restricting movement. But for Mr. Modi, the rally was a chance to celebrate what the US and India had in common.
In these years, our two nations have taken their relationship to new heights. Mr. President, this morning in Houston, You can hear the heartbeat of this great partnership in this celebration of the world's two largest democracies.
While Kashmir and India's tensions with its Muslim neighbour Pakistan weren't mentioned directly, President Trump referred to them obliquely in his speech.
Today we honor all of the brave American and Indian military service members who work together to safeguard our freedom. We stand proudly in defense of liberty, and we are committed to protecting innocent civilians from the threat of radical Islamic terrorism.
Applause there from the thousands of Indian Americans who attended. Julia Marshall spoke to Rochelle Almeida of New York University. Was she surprised at such levels of support?
No, not at all. In fact, this was what I expected. And I have to say that it exceeded my expectations. And the reason that I expected this was because it doesn't matter where in the world he's gone, Modi has attracted record numbers of diasporic Indians, and they have been giving him this kind of rock star reception. So given that this event was publicized as much as it was, I very, very much expected this sort of a turnout, and I certainly wasn't disappointed.
But would all of those there have embraced Mr. Modi's political agenda?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that everyone present sees eye to eye with Mr. Modi and the ways in which he has been governing India, certainly in recent times, and particularly with regards to Kashmir. But I do not believe that they saw this rally as the proper venue to air their own political differences with him. I think they saw the rally as an opportunity to cheer an Indian leader and the terrific camaraderie he seems to have built with the leader of the free world, Donald Trump. That, I think, is a matter for all South Asians, for all Indians, certainly. And that was what they were congratulating him for and what they turned out to perceive. So I don't really think that they are well eye to eye with him on every issue.
What about President Trump? For him, was this maybe a re-election pitch to 4 million Americans of Indian descent, almost 2/3 of whom voted for his opponent at the last presidential election?
Undoubtedly. I don't think he'd have made the trip, and I don't think he'd have shared the stage with another very charismatic leader if he did not think that it would garner him more votes from this segment of the diasporic population. So I am very sure that he was also looking at what a rally like this could do for him. And knowing that the Indian American has traditionally had greater sympathies with democratic causes, I can see that he used this rally as an opportunity to try to sway them along different lines. And I have little doubt that he sees this Indian American population as the sort that can be his supporter in time to come, and certainly in this coming election.
But why have Indian Americans voted in so great numbers in the past for the Democrats?
Because I think they are immigrants themselves, and the Democrats have always been sympathetic towards immigrants and have policies that have favored immigrants right throughout. So they automatically see themselves as siding with the political party that looks after their interests and has looked after their interests for a very long time.
Rochelle Almeida. Well, back in Washington, it's being claimed that a telephone conversation in July between President Trump and the leader of Ukraine could be grounds for Mr. Trump's impeachment. Adam Schiff, who heads the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee, is pressing for the contents of the conversation to be released, but so far the White House has stalled. Mr. Schiff told CNN that if the president was trying to browbeat a foreign leader to provide dirt on an opponent, then impeachment would be the only option, as our Washington correspondent David Willis reports.
Reports here suggest that President Trump repeatedly pressed the president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, to rekindle an investigation into the son of the Democratic presidential frontrunner Joe Biden during a phone call with Mr. Zelensky in July this year. Hunter Biden spent some time working for an energy company in the Ukraine, whilst his father was serving as vice president to Barack Obama. And at one point, Biden Sr. threatened to withhold US aid to Ukraine if a prosecutor who was investigating his son's firm wasn't sacked. The prosecutor was widely seen as corrupt, however, and a subsequent investigation found no evidence of wrongdoing. President Trump conceded that he had brought Joe Biden's name up during the conversation, but claimed he had every right to do so. Mr. Biden says it's an abuse of power, and he's calling for an inquiry into the matter.
David Willis. You're listening to the Global News Podcast on the BBC World Service. Still to come, Arab parties in Israel are supporting Benjamin Netanyahu's rival Benny Gantz for Prime Minister, the first such endorsement by an Arab political group in more than a quarter of a century. But first, more than 2,000 people have died from Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the World Health Organization relies on early, full, and accurate information as an essential tool in the battle against the spread of the disease to neighboring countries. But in a rare move, the WHO has accused Tanzania of not being open about suspected cases in the country. Our Africa regional editor, Mary Harper, has the details.
The WHO has said that Tanzania has been withholding information about suspected Ebola cases, and it cites an unofficial report, that's how it puts it, of one person who died from suspected Ebola, and it said that there was a test conducted and the test was said to be positive, and that also people who'd been in contact with that individual had been quarantined. And then it also mentioned another 2 suspected Ebola cases, and it said one of them had proven negative and the other one, there's no information about it.
It sounds like it's very unusual for the WHO to intervene in this way.
It's really unusual. The WHO normally encourages countries, sort of praises them and says, you know, we'll help you do more in terms of Ebola prevention and treatment and finding new cases of the disease. It's normally very, very sensitive, the way it deals with Ebola, which is a complicated disease, lots of suspicion arising from it. So the fact that it's come out with this really hard statement against Tanzania shows, I suppose, just how very angry it is if indeed there are cases of that disease in a country and the country's not saying anything about it.
And what's been the response from Tanzania?
So far, we've been trying all day to get a response. So far, deafening silence from Tanzania. But Tanzania did say pretty much a week ago that it had no suspected Ebola cases and there'd been no deaths from Ebola there. So basically, it does appear that if indeed there are Ebola incidences in Tanzania, and one wouldn't have expected the WHO to come out with a statement unless it was pretty sure something was going on, basically that Tanzania has been hiding this information, which makes any attempt to control this disease, which has been spreading in a complicated way anyway, going to make it really impossible to do that.
And it's been spreading right around Tanzania.
Yes, it has. There's been confirmed cases in Uganda. It started in Democratic Republic of Congo in the east, which is a very unstable part of the world where lots of militias are active. They even attack Ebola treatment centres. There's also great fear and suspicion and superstition around the very idea of Ebola existing. Lots of people in Congo don't even believe that Ebola is a real disease, and they sometimes attack health officials who come to help them. So there's been confirmed cases in Uganda across the border, and also there were suspected cases in Rwanda. The WHO since rode back and said it wasn't actually confirmed that Ebola had been found in Rwanda, but it's obviously very, very nervous about it spreading because the movement of the population across those borders is just so fluid.
Mary Harper. In Israel, a bloc of Arab parties, which came third in last Tuesday's election, has recommended that Benny Gantz, leader of the Blue and White Alliance, which won the most seats, should become prime minister. It's the first such endorsement by an Arab political group in more than a quarter of a century. Our correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher, looks at what it might mean.
This is a significant exercise of political power by Israel's Palestinian citizens. The Israeli President Reuven Rivlin is consulting party leaders about whom he should ask to lead the country after last week's inconclusive election results. The Arab parties put in a strong showing, becoming the third largest force in the legislature. Their support will not give Benny Gantz and his Blue and White Alliance a majority, but it will give him a boost in negotiations about who gets the first chance to form a government. The leader of the Arab grouping, Ayman Odeh, said it wasn't endorsing Mr. Gantz and his policies, but was moving to try and block Benjamin Netanyahu from securing another term, and to send a clear message that Israel's future must include the full and equal participation of its Palestinian citizens.
Barbara Plett-Usher. When the Italian government collapsed in August, everyone was expecting fresh national elections. But the anti-establishment Five Star Movement and the centre-left PD, former political foes, came together to agree a new coalition government. That left the right-wing League out in the cold. So how are Italians reacting to the new situation? Bethany Bell reports from Veneto, near Venice, one of Italy's most prosperous regions and a traditional League stronghold.
Molto bene, perché è un uomo che ha cercato
Giovanni, a pensioner in Verona, tells me how much he likes Matteo Salvini for setting a new agenda in Italy and tackling the migrant issue. The new government, he said, is very bad.
Molto male.
And it's not just Salvini supporters who are concerned. Matteo, a student, thinks there should be fresh elections.
The new government is not elected. This is a technical government. I think is a better new election.
What do you think of Salvini?
Salvini is a good speaker.
Would you vote for him?
No. I am a moderate.
A warehouse at the Magni Group headquarters in Verona, a family-run multinational business which operates in the steel industry. Its vice-chairman, Francesco Magni, hopes that the Italian Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte, will keep the new government together. Political instability, he says, is bad for business.
The problem is the government, because, as you know, it is a coalition between two parties that were used to fight each other until the day before. Also, the previous government was exactly the same. So I hope that the leadership of Mr. Conte will be able to let these two political parties remain together as long as possible, because stability, again, is one of the fundamental issues of our country. We change government too frequently.
Matteo Salvini greeted by cheering crowds at a rally for his League party. He remains a popular figure, even in opposition. The governor of Veneto, Luca Zaia, also from the League, says all Mr. Salvini has to do is wait.
It's a great opportunity. È una grande opportunità. Noi volevamo andare al voto, però è pur vero che noi adesso faremo opposizione.
It's a great opportunity. We have the street on our side. We have the citizens on our side. It's a question of waiting for better times. Also because this government will have many challenges ahead.
Stanno riempiendo di chiacchiere il paese.
But not everyone is convinced by Mr. Salvini, including Anna from Verona.
I don't like politicians with too much arrogance and too much populism style, so it's not my kind of politician.
That report by Bethany Bell in northern Italy. The president of World Football's governing body, FIFA, says his organization has been assured by Iran that women will be allowed to attend men's football matches from the next international game. Iran is due to play Cambodia in a World Cup qualifier in Tehran next month. Women have, in effect, been banned from entering stadiums where men are playing since just after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Earlier this month, an Iranian woman known as the Blue Girl died after setting herself on fire in fear of a prison sentence after she tried to attend a football match dressed as a man. Gianni Infantino described Iran's move as important and long overdue.
We have been assured that as of the next international game of Iran, which is to be played on the 10th of October, women will be allowed to enter football stadiums. This is something very important since 40 years that this was not happening, with a couple of exceptions. But it's important to move to the next level and to the next stage with, of course, our thoughts to all the women of Iran, but also all the women around the world.
The president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino. Julian Marshall spoke to Mariam Shojai, who has Canadian citizenship and for the past 5 years has campaigned abroad and inside Iran for women's entry into football games, her reaction to Tehran's announcement, and the impact of the Blue Girl.
Blue Girl's death received so many attention in the national level and internationally. For this specific game, I don't think that's something to do with it because it was before her death, but unfortunately she lost her life, but I'm sure that is going to affect in future for other games.
Tell me about your own personal campaign to try to get access to football games in Iran for female fans.
Yes, I created a campaign 5 years ago. As you know, this is not a law. So I thought there should be a way to get over this problem. And after a while, I thought that this is something that we cannot fix it within the country. We have to ask outside a specific FIFA. So I've traveled a lot where Iran played a game. I went there with my banner and I managed a petition. And last November, I handed my petition to Ms. Fatma Samoura, the Secretary Council of FIFA.
These banners of yours, you held them up, did you, outside football stadiums in Tehran?
Yes, I did it outside of the stadium in Tehran. I showed my banner after Iran was qualified for World Cup 2 years ago. And there was a celebration on the street of Tehran. So I went there and I showed my banner.
How many female fans would you expect to attend this international between Iran and Cambodia?
I mean, in total, I don't think there would be so many fans because it's not a very big game. But today there was a derby, and if women were allowed to go, I'm sure that it would be thousands of women. Same thing when Iran has a game in like World Cup or AFC outside of country, you see so many female Iranians like traveling to support the team.
And I would imagine that you would hope that allowing female fans into football stadiums will lead to other changes in the status of Iranian women within Iran.
Yes, but the most important thing is that was a common demand from within the country. You know, this ban doesn't exist in Saudi Arabia anymore, but it was solved from top down. It was solved by the government. But this is something that is going to be solved because we demand it, and now we know our power.
Mariam Shojai. And that's all from us for now, but there'll be an updated version of the Global News podcast later. And if you want to comment on this podcast or the topics covered in it, you can send us an email. The address is globalpodcast@bbc.co.uk. I'm Emilio San Pedro. Until next time, goodbye.